The Netflix subs for this show are dog ass. No More Running for Me, Doug, which is supposed to be No More Running for Me, dog. And I'm like looking around like, who the fuck is Doug? Nigga, it's like 2077. The fuck are y'all still using gas for? Who is still going to have a gas car in 2077? But the other thing is, I'm scared. I'm really scared, all right?
I try to be your hero, but my heart is a problem. Maybe if I rip it out my chest, my dear, oh, I could think your problems away. I could wish your problems away.
All right, so, hello. I am Suti Tooti. Most of you probably, no. My subs are pretty dead. That's kind of my fault. But aside from that, that's not the jolliest of intros. I'm Suti Tooti. If you've never seen me before, I used to do episodic reviews, blah, 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 blah. I'm doing this as a pilot episode, basically, for a new podcast that I'm starting. So some of you know that in the past, I've done like a seasonal anime podcast. I specifically did this last year. I used to do seasonal overviews and episodic reviews of stuff for anime back from like 2014 up through like 2018. Took a break or stopped uploading because the anime turned really bad for a while. It's still not all that great, but we're running into more quality. I have way more time on my hands because I am no longer in college. I have a full-time job. Hey, I'm a software engineer, in case you didn't know. It's pretty cool. Now that I have time to actually do stuff, and now I have the facilities and the money to do things, I can actually dedicate myself to getting back into hobbies that I like, specifically music and this YouTube thing. I really want to get pumping on this content creation thing, and I think podcasting is probably the most efficient way for me to do it right now. And I think I can still stay somewhat engaging while I do it. So that's the route we're taking. As for what this podcast is, this is more of a J Media podcast than it really is just an anime podcast. So the way I plan on splitting this up is largely going to be seasonal anime or anime to some extent. Then like manga if we have any to talk about. I don't think there's really any to talk about this week. Typically, those are going to be suggested by you guys is what I'm going to do. And you can tell me what to read. I'll go give it a shot, and I'll give you like a first impressions. And if it's good enough, we'll keep reading it. And the last part, which I'm personally most excited for, is the J music part. So first, let me throw that goddamn thing so you can see the pretty background that I set up for you, okay? So the J music part of the podcast will be pretty interesting. We're going to talk about new releases, if there's any albums, specific artists that I kind of want to talk about, whether that end up being like Eve, obviously, whenever he drops like a Yoasobi thing. We'll go through like stuff like that, essentially. And I think this is a good way to make sure I don't alienate every portion of my fucking fan base by not doing anime content or not doing J music related content. I kind of want to hit all bases, or bases, I guess. And the content's tangentially related. It's related well enough so that I don't think any of you will feel the need to just want to completely skip past shit. So, with that all being said, we're going to go ahead and get into our first segment, which is the anime segment. So, there's 3 shows we are going to end up talking about today. The first of which is a Netflix original that just dropped September 13th. That is 2 days prior to when I'm recording this. I binge watched this entire show within the span of, I wanted to do it in one night, but I have work. So I did it in 2 nights. Pretty good show from a studio I don't like. It's 10 episodes, directed by Hiroyuki Imaishi, Studio Trigger show. It's Cyberpunk Edgerunners. It's a 2022 adaptation of a spin-off, I believe. It's like a spin-off series to Cyberpunk. It's set in the Cyberpunk universe. If you don't know what Cyberpunk is, it's sci-fi cyberpunk, literally, video game that came out a couple of years ago. Notoriously broken, reviewed really poorly, really cool setting. And it got an anime project licensed produced by CD Projekt Red, and now it's licensed by Netflix. Generally speaking, I thought that this thing was actually really good. I hate saying that because I don't like triggers. All right, I am not one for the emotions of the world. All right, like I like me some fun. I just don't like it when that nigga does it. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm a hater. I'ma just be real with you. I ain't fuck with Kill la Kill. I never watched Gurren Lagann. I know you niggas are not gonna like me for that. What else? I mean, he's also directed Promare, anything that comes, any of the really big trigger shows you can probably think of, he's had his hand in. His directing is kind of obvious. It's really bombastic. It's really bold, flary, etc., etc. So we'll get to the show. Generally speaking, I thought the show was good. If I had to give it a rating, I probably would go about mid-7, maybe like a 7.5, maybe slightly lower. I don't want to just talk. The way we're going to structure this discussion is more so going to be like, I'm going to give you the things that I hated, and then I'm going to give you the things that I hate that I loved. Okay? We're going to go on that. We're going to kind of like interweave them. Before we get to that, one of the discussions I want to just quickly tackle is there's been some discussion about the opening. I didn't know that this was this big of a deal to people. So if you're unaware, the opening for Cyberpunk Edgerunners is This Fire by, I think his name's like Fernando something. It is a song that I believe was actually on like the Burnout 3 soundtrack as well. Because if you go to the comments for that actual song, that's all that's fucking there. It's just Burnout Paradise and Burnout 3. I have no problem with the opening. I've heard that people have an issue with the edit itself, specifically the edit of the song, because it essentially cuts the entire chorus out of the let me change that. It cuts the chorus off of its initial progression. So they cut the first chorus. There's like a bridge that basically is like a drum roll almost. And then it ends on a chorus, but it's not as grand of a chorus as is in the original song. At least not at the when it's supposed to pop in. Personally, I don't care. I think that edit of the song just feels like it feels more like a Western title sequence to me, like a opening credit sequence to me than it does an anime opening. I do think it's important to establish the difference, right? We are talking about a show that got licensed and binged and just dumped on you by Netflix, right? So I think the expectations were kind of set there when that was the opening title sequence, whatnot. I really wasn't all that surprised. Visually, I think it looks really nice. The complaint I've heard though is that it just feels empty, and I can understand that. I just personally don't. I can hear it, I can see it. It doesn't bother me. I get the complaint. I just don't care. Now that that's addressed, we can move on to the other stuff. So now we can start interweaving, all right? So the first thing that I fucking hated about Cyberpunk Edgerunners is Lucy is really fucking hot. Like, my notes for my notes as so what I was doing when I was watching Cyberpunk, right? I was taking notes basically up through episode 6 or episode 7. Whenever my laptop died, I stopped taking notes and I just watched it, right? A lot of these notes are very, very horny notes. We'll go down some of them so you can kind of understand why I'm frustrated that this character is hot, okay? We are going to start with the very first time we see her. This white-haired girl is bad as hell. I've only seen her body and I know she can be my wife. I am not shallow at all. These are actually written in the notes. I'm not, you know. Oh my fucking god, no way, she's actually hot. This hentai is gonna be fucking insane. How do I pronounce like I'm gonna do like I think that kind of gets the point across. Lucy is her name. Okay. Yeah, this is getting really horny. I would fuck Lucy endlessly, or rather, she would fuck me with a pole, a strap-on, a roll of paper towels, and anything else you can possibly think of. I'm not horny, I promise. Lucy on top of him on the stretcher. So that might be a slight spoiler, but it's not really a spoiler. There's nothing that happens there. There's a scene where some girl is on top of this guy, and it's hot, and I got horny. I feel like the more we go down this, the worse it's gonna get. There's something about Lucy sliding her ass on my face. There's a lot of horny shit in here. All right, clearly you can see I'm sexually repressed and I'm a degenerate, but I think you get the point. Lucy's really hot, and it just pisses me off because I'm sexually frustrated, and I'm tired of getting cucked. And if you've watched the show, you can understand why I feel like I would be cucked. I feel like she was supposed to be mine. Clearly she's not. Moving on. Thing that I liked. On the topic of designs, Yo Yoshinari is a fucking god at designing characters. The character designs in Cyberpunk are fucking nuts. Like, I was genuinely fucking impressed. I think part of it definitely has to deal with the fact that we are dealing with the Cyberpunk aesthetic in a 2D environment as opposed to a 3D environment. I think these outfits and the fashion choices and things can definitely work in 3D, but they just look better with a trigger aesthetic, like an anime aesthetic. I think the use of color can be a lot more vibrant, to be completely honest with you. Especially, and we'll get to this, I think it might be the next point or the point afterwards, kind of like the difference between why this adapts so well, and I think this adapts the setting better of Cyberpunk than the game actually does, and some of the inherent limitations of like having a game with a setting that's this ambitious. But generally speaking, it's just like, yeah, the color choices for characters, the clothing, the aesthetics, the jewelry, it's just fire. Obviously, the best design in the show is Lucy, right? Like, she's hot. You know, I thought you caught that when I couldn't stop gushing over her hornily. Second best design I'd probably say is the main character, and then there are just a lot of great designs all over the place. I just feel like it's really important to note because character designs don't necessarily get the recognition they should get, but these are like, I feel like you could show me a silhouette of any of these characters and I know what character this is, which is a good thing because I think that's when you start to border upon iconic, or not iconic, let's say this, a series icon as opposed to like iconic, I guess, but a series icon as opposed to just some character, right? So next thing, I absolutely fucking hated, this is unironic, the Netflix subs for this show are dog ass. I don't know what happened. Like, I'm really confused. So for context, I watched this show English dubbed, right? But I watched it English dubbed on Netflix with subtitles, primarily because I was like, well, if I get up and I gotta watch from like my kitchen or something, or I'm watching from my couch and maybe the dialogue is like kind of muddy, at least I can figure out what's going on, right? I'm not gonna be completely lost. Absolutely not, didn't fucking help. I was more accurate than the subtitles were. The two that I wrote down that I thought were pretty funny is there's this organization that's called Arasaka in the thing. They call them in the subtitles at one point they say Arasake is still short one executive. There's no more running for me, Doug, which is supposed to be no more running for me, dog. Like, hey nigga, no more running for me, dog. I'm laying it down here, but it's no more running for me, Doug. And I'm like looking around like, who the fuck is Doug, nigga? There's another one that I didn't write down that is like one of the characters, I think it's like a brother and a sister or something. One of them is, I think the sister is like, oh wow, you have fans. That's kind of wild. And I think it's not even like a mistranslation, it's just an incorrect usage of the pronouns. The subtitles are written so that it makes it seem as if like the guy is acknowledging that he has his own fans, and it's weird because he's not the one speaking, it's the girl, so obviously she's talking about him, and real big subtitle disconnects. I don't understand how so many blunders happen. I pointed out 3. There are a ton more. Oh yeah, the most blaring one. How the fuck did I forget this one? So there's a point where somebody's referring to the main character as as rookie, right? So they're like, it's something along the lines of like, you got a lot to learn, rookie, and the subtitles are like, you've got a lot to learn, Wookie. I was confused. At first I was like, maybe that's something in the game, and then I'm like, my ears just heard rookie. So no, it's not. I don't know what happened. I don't know how blunders like this happen, but Netflix, fix your shit. You know, this was supposed to be like a joking, I hate this shit, but this is actually a fucking problem. This can't keep happening. Moving on. Something that I love that I hated. Night City is fucking amazing in 2D. In 2D. I feel like I have to stress that. So, also, I feel like the gain on my mic might be a little loud. Let me slightly turn that down a bit. Okay. So, Night City, you know, in Cyberpunk the game, is a really cool environment. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I look at footage, I'm like, yeah, this looks like a cool thing. But I think part of what kills it in the game's context is, I think a setting like Night City is too ambitious for games. It's a weird thing to say, right? But I think a setting that's that dense is, oddly enough, sort of, you almost limit it. You limit the exploration and the ways that the audience can engage in that setting by giving them a chance to engage with it with a controller. There are technical limitations to games. There's limitations to how you can visually represent it, because they were aiming for a 3D art style, like 3D graphics and whatnot. And I think it just really sells the setting short. I just don't think there's any way to fully utilize it, as opposed to the anime, which does not really suffer from this issue, right? Because you can do a lot more to represent a setting in 2D animation. You can get away with a lot more like animation and faces and things of the sort that just aren't fucking realistic, but have way more character to them than something that is attempting to be like a photorealistic reimagination of a cyberpunk universe, if that makes sense. Again, it's kind of the same with like CG. Well, I want to always say it's the same as like CG characters and like 2D like character acting, but I do think you can get away with a lot goofier character acting in 2D. You can just get away with a lot more than you can in 2D. I think the thing that definitely stands out the most is the color usage, though. Again, because you're dealing with 3D graphics and you're aiming for something that's photorealistic, a lot of those colors in the game are not going to pop, they're not going to pop as much as they do in 2D animation. Like, and I forgot who is specifically in charge of the color direction and whatnot in Cyberpunk, because it's actually listed in the opening credits. Maybe I'll put like something in the description or something in the on screen. I don't know. But point being, use of color, the vibrance of the colors, I feel like comes out more in 2D. I think that also just has to deal with like how you're shading things. Personally, I think this city just adapts better as an anime. And I feel like I should probably state this before I like move on from this point. I'm gonna be real with you. I never had faith in the Cyberpunk game. So prior to it actually coming out, I was basically the guy that was like how I was with Mass Effect Andromeda. So when they showed the first couple of trailers, like the very reveal trailer for Andromeda, I was like, well, this game is obviously broken. And that's a red flag to me, because regardless of if the game has like time to come out, or it still has a time for them to development time and whatnot, you still chose willingly to show this trailer as promotional material. I had similar concerns about Cyberpunk, but more so in regards to seeing shit like the combat engine, sort of like the representation of the environment, which again is somewhat cool. It's pretty cool for a video game setting, but just didn't seem to take full advantage of a cyberpunk really vibrant aesthetic. There are just things about the game I wasn't sold on, and then when it came out broken, I was definitely not sold on it. I think the scale was something to be wary of. I just don't believe much. It was just too ambitious. for gaming as a medium, I feel like a lot of times. So yeah, I never really had any faith in the game. I was kind of hoping that it did well, but wasn't expecting. I was expecting to be fairly mediocre. I didn't expect it to be that bad though. And so I'm happy that the setting didn't go to waste because we have a really good anime for it now. Last thing that I absolutely fucking hate. There's a scene in episode 4. This is not a spoiler. Okay. There's a scene in episode 4. There's a gas station, there's prices, and there's a fucking gas price. That's unleaded $4.85. So there's two issues with this, right? One, nigga, it's like 2077. The fuck are y'all still using gas for? Like, who is still going to have a gas car in 2077? How are they going to be popular enough for there to be legitimate gas stations selling different types of gas, right? California, I think, is trying to outlaw the selling of all gas-powered cars or non-electric powered cars by 2036. You're telling me in 31 years after that we're still gonna have gas cars around? That's bullshit. But the other thing is, I cannot believe these niggas are only paying $4.85 for fucking gas. Like, both because I'm paying more for gas right now, and because in regards to inflation, that just doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, if you're gonna be paying for gas, like, and they're gonna be taxed out the ass in 2077, primarily because of what I just said about, like, stuff, people like, states like California banning gas-powered cars and stuff like that, or the selling of them by that point. 30 years, they would have banned them by that point, so you might not even be able to find a fucking gas station, to be completely honest with you, but I would assume they're going to be heavily taxed. And inflation, like, what are we talking about? $4.85, that's bullshit. I want those gas prices. I'm honestly just jealous because I'm tired of paying $5.50 a gallon for gas. I hate California. I don't know why I moved here. Last thing that I hate, that I love, is that Imaishi, let me just check the time on this recording, because I know this seems like it's going to be up. We've already been going for like 22 minutes. Hey, it's going to be, these podcasts are going to be pretty long. Some of you probably have not heard any discussion on Cyberpunk, so maybe you'll actually be okay with this. Speaking of which, if you want to discuss more, or there's stuff you want to talk about, put it in the comments below. If you say something interesting, I probably will actually just address it on the next podcast, as well as just reply to it in the comments. So, anywho, last thing that I hate, that I fucking loved. That nigga Imaishi finally got me, nigga. I said this earlier. This is the first Trigger show that I have finished and given like an above average rating to. Well, a good rating to, let alone above average, right? So like, or is it the other way around? Is it like above average, let alone good? I don't know. But point being, I told y'all I dropped Kill la Kill. I dropped Inferno Cop. Inferno Cop's not even in a Maishi. I don't remember. Eno Battle, I don't think is Little Witch Academia. I don't think is Dyna Zenon. I think I tried Kisniver for an episode. I like Trigger shows. Typically, the way they go for me is like, I start them and the first episode is really cool, and by the time we get to episode 4 or 5, I'm either tired or the thing has already gotten convoluted and melodramatic and gone to shit, and it's no longer enjoyable for me. So for this to have only been 10 episodes and me to have loved it so fucking much, I think is a testament both to just like qualities of the show that we've already talked about, but really importantly, the direction. Imaishi killed this shit, bro. There are certain tricks I just didn't expect to see in something like this. One of my favorite ones is definitely so there's like this scene there's like this part in episode 6. It's kind of like a Aku no Hana-esque thing. Again, this is all spoiler free, so please don't fucking skip this, okay? There's a scene in episode 6. There's a character that's really scared, right? And there's like a zoom in on their eyes, like this really tense. They're like really tense up. It's maybe something like this, and the camera just sits here on this person's face, side view, like a profile shot almost, for maybe like 15 seconds. fuck me real good, Lucy. They don't do the last part, but I feel like I had to get that out. It's basically like that, right? And it's Aku no Hana-esque because, or maybe Mushishi as well. It's the same director, right? It's how long they stay on the shot before they interrupt it, and they're just like, "You're actually scared as shit, aren't you?" It's like, then they kick you out of the shot. I think holding shots like that, awkwardly making the audience confused, it's just something I like to see. I wasn't that big of a fan of it until I watched World Trigger, which was doing it, I feel like on accident, because they just didn't have enough material to adapt during the first season at the time. And then something like Aku no Hana, which did it, but it was like a legitimate directing trick to build tension. Another thing, color usage is insane. Obviously, that's not only his job. He's obviously going to have some influence over it, but you know, I just wanted to say, everything's eye-popping as shit, and I'm assuming he had a relatively large say in how the show was necessarily going to look. Color usage, things of the sort. But really, it's like, there are, like, certain directing tricks, particularly, one of my favorite ones, so these are my two favorite ones, I think. The first one is intense moments, and this doesn't happen a lot of times during the show, right? But there are times where there's like a tense scene or something, like a do or die split decision the guy's gotta make, main character's gotta make. And there's like this blue text that like writes itself on screen. And it's like, it's weird because it's really immersion breaking, but in a good way. I don't think breaking immersion is necessarily a bad thing. I think in this case, breaking the immersion and having text that's popping up, obviously, like, that is not appearing in the context of the show. So, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, non-diegetic text, basically, right? That's popping up on the screen is a really good way to get across the fact that, like, oh shit, this moment's so serious that I have to explicitly let the audience know and like break them out of the fact that like you are actively engaged in this really tense moment. It's weird. Breaking the tension or breaking the immersion helps the tension. Don't typically see that very often. I don't see it very often. I love that trick a lot. The other one is the repeating montage of locations. So this is something you see more primarily in episode 1. Where they are doing like establishing shots of the city, but it's more like the main character, he leaves his house, he's like walking out the city, he goes to a crosswalk, he's marching up a hill, he's marching through other parts of the city. And the thing I just like is when a show has a cool montage like that to establish the city, and then they keep using it. So like it becomes like a reusable set piece. And you start to grow an affinity for the city. This is one of those things that I like to give shows credit for, because I think there are shows where the setting is its own character. Durarara has this with Ikebukuro, I feel like is a very good one to look at. But Cyberpunk definitely has this with Night City. And I think that particular trick of reusing these environments to produce affinity, an affinity with the audience for them, is a really good trick. I wish more shows would use it. But yeah. Oh yeah, last thing. There's like this dialogue HUD that goes over the screen, that goes on the screen in like the top left corner. That's an Easter egg to the game, but I also think it's just kind of cool because it's diegetic as well, it feels like. Diegetic meaning that the characters can actually, like, it is actually existing in the world of the characters, and thus the main character, whoever we're looking at, is actually seeing that text. They're seeing that, like, speech bubble pop up or whatever. It's a nice detail, and that's really all it is. It's just kind of cool. It's not as it doesn't necessarily do anything functionally, I don't think, like the blue text and the repeating establishing shots do, but just something I wanted to mention. And I think that's basically all the notes I had. Overall, it's a really good show. I expect there to be a lot of discussion probably around this. or maybe not a lot of discussion, maybe a lot of reactions. I wanted to personally give you this, both in like podcast format and this ain't gonna be a short like standalone video, but short video form. Short and big ass quotes. That is all I got with Cyberpunk. We got 2 more shows to talk about on our list. I am going to take some water first, and I'm probably going to split that segment apart, make sure everything recorded fine, and I'll be right back. Alrighty then, y'all. Next fucking topic. I think that segment actually went pretty well for a starting segment to a J Media podcast. We are now talking about our second anime. The next 2 anime have actually not started airing yet, but their predecessors obviously have. These are both fall shows. They're sequels to shows that have previously come out. The first one we're talking about is, as you can see on this back monitor, you might know who that is. That is Fushi from To Your Eternity, or Fumetsu no Anatae, if you are familiar with it. I binged in quotes because I keep saying binge, but I'm not watching these in one sitting. I'm trying to. The show that we discuss after this is a show I actually did binge because I did watch it in one sitting again. Because I forgot about some stuff about it when it aired. We'll get to that in a little bit. But I want to talk about To Your Eternity Season 2. Largely because I actually was pretty high on the first season. So I'll get some stuff out about the first season because I don't really think I got to give my thoughts on it outside of the first couple of episodes when I was doing the seasonal podcast back then, last year. So, largely speaking, positive. I think I gave it a low to a mid 7. Some of you will look at these scores and be like, he gave Cyberpunk a fucking solid 7. He gave To Your Eternity a low to a solid 7. What the fuck does this guy give a 9 to? For reference, I've not given a 9 since 2017. The last 9 I gave was Oseki no Kuni. The last thing I gave a 9 before that was Sekai Surikado, and then it was Occultic 9. I gave Sekai Surikado a 10. We'll get to that at some other point. Anyways, I don't want to go off on this tangent about my scores. Point being, I think To Your Eternity does a lot of things right, particularly in how emotionally evocative it is. I've talked about the first episode in bunches last year. How absurdly well-directed it is. The use of fire to show like this guy's disdaining or like diminishing optimism and whatnot. The use of optimism to actually build affinity and empathy for the character, and the audience kind of being at dissonance with him at points, almost pitying him for the level of optimism that he shows and whatnot. Additionally, one thing that kind of stuck out when I was watching it was I felt the need to compare this to Violet Evergarden because, and I think some of you might understand the angle here, but in both shows you have Violet, who is kind of like this husk of a person emotionally because she's grown up basically as like a child soldier or whatever, and she's kind of like a weapon. But you have somebody like Fushi, who's a husk by design. Like he's a husk because that's literally how he was created. He was nothing. He's an orb, right? So I found it interesting to compare and contrast these because I dropped Violet Evergarden, I think 4 or 5 episodes in, because I found it fucking obnoxious and really boring. It was either one of the two. It couldn't have been both. Well, either one of the two at any given point, at any given episode. I dropped it when it got obnoxious, not when it got boring, in case you're curious. The reason I bring these up, the reason I bring that show up is because I think, as opposed to somebody like Violet, well, there's 2 things here, right? I think Violet Evergarden, like, forces conflict using Violet. She, in essence, functions as a plot device because she's so fucking oblivious to social cues and interactions and how to act and stuff that she unintentionally creates conflict, where I think it's that comes off as forced, Fushi into Your Eternity is just kind of meandering into conflicts. He's meandering into situations, and he is remedying them largely until like the latter half of the show where, you know, like it starts talking about like a savior complex, but it's weird because it's like he kind of is actually a savior, so it's not really a complex, if that makes sense. But point being, if there's a difference between inciting the conflict unnaturally and waltzing into the conflict. And I think To Your Eternity does this much better than something like Violet Evergarden. I think there's a lot of merit to just kind of placing the character there and seeing how he reacts. Additionally, I think Fushi is just inherently more interesting. This is largely a preference thing, but I think the setup of Violet is obviously less interesting than this orb that is created to absorb experiences of life. And it's just cool to see him pick up on language, pick up on empathy, and a lot of various other things that something like Violet Evergarden doesn't necessarily do. This was not really a time for me to shit on Violet Evergarden. I know it might feel like that. Again, I only watched 4 episodes. I used it because I do think it's a good comparison point, because I don't really hear those two shows talked about in the same light, but I do think they are very similar, at least through the 4 episodes I saw of Violet Evergarden, and the type of character they're working with. One of the things I wanted to talk about with the first season as well, how good that fucking opening is. Again, I talked about this in last year's podcast, but goddamn it, it's weird because the more I watch that show, the better the opening gets, and that's not inherently weird, but it's weird to me because it becomes more emotionally evocative in a way that's not traditional to anime openings, meaning I think most anime openings start to evoke more melancholy upon you, or let me change this. They start to invoke nostalgia upon you as you finish the show, the closer you get to the ending. You may not experience that. That's typically how I interact with anime openings as the show progresses. This is not that. This was like, the more I understood the shots that are being shown in the opening, the more melancholic it became. And that's weird because it's the first time you view the opening, it's really mysterious. It's like a mysterious melancholy because Hikaru Utada is going fucking crazy vocally, and her use of like her like dissension, or like her continued like steps down like chromatically, her use of vibrato, like her voice in general, like the way she just gives that fucking song off, the way that she sings that shit, it inherently feels a little melancholic. But then there's also the thing that I talked about previously, which is this cool trick the opening does where there's like a dissonance, there's a tonal dissonance between the shots in the foreground. Loud ass playing, goddamn! I don't even know if y'all can hear that. That definitely threw me off. Anyways, there's a tonal dissonance between the shots in the foreground and the shots in the background of the opening that happen. My hood fucking fell. I'm putting that shit back up. I just like wearing this particular thing with a hood. I like my hair. Anyways, I keep getting distracted on this fucking tonal dissonance thing. Basic idea is that the shots in the background are like really nostalgic and both pleasant, while the shots in the foreground are like fucking terrifying, like niggas basically turned to zombies, people crying, people dying, blood, death, like shit like that. I think that becomes way more evocative the further you get along in the show and you understand the consequences of those situations, and you've actually had the experience of losing certain characters and just going through a lot of emotional moments. I think that opening is just fucking fantastic. Now moving on to season 2, and why I'm talking about this show. So there's 2 things. One thing I want to talk about is, and this is gonna be pretty quick. the reason I caught up to this show is because, and the reason I caught up to the following show we're going to talk about, which is Mob Psycho 2/3, is nowadays, if you find a show that you think is good, that is going to get that you presume could possibly get a second season, my advice is that you catch up to that show before that second season comes out. And I say that because you look at something like this fall is literally Chainsaw Man and sequels. And everything else is pretty fucking irrelevant except for like Urusei Yatsura, but that's like a remake. And personally, I don't think I'm really probably going to watch it. I might watch maybe like a couple episodes. If somebody tells me there are good episodes in there that I need to watch, it's episodic, I'll probably watch it, right? But anywho, point being, if you find a show you think is going to get a second season, you need to watch that shit, or you are actually just going to be left out of everything seasonally. Which is what I ran into for like a 2-year span. It's just like shitty sequels. How many goddamn seasons of Overlord can we get in Danmachi? I'm tired, nigga. I don't want any more. Yeah, that's primarily the reason I caught up. But the other thing I wanted to talk about with season 2 in particular is I'm expecting a worse show here. And I hate fucking saying that because I really like this show. I experienced a lot of emotional points. Specifically, I know like around episode 14, I had to take a fucking pause when I was watching this. I got really teary-eyed. This shit was really hitting me. It made me think about a lot of shit. Especially the Savior complex. I can definitely relate to that shit. Why am I expecting a worse show? Because something weird happened with this show between its first and its second season. Very odd. So, first off, production studio changed. We've gone from Brainspace to Drive. All right? And this doesn't necessarily mean anything, because if you have animators that are like freelancers and whatever, or maybe like Drive, hypothetically, it's not. But hypothetically, if Drive was like what am I trying to say? A subsidiary of Brainspace, this would not necessarily be a problem. Like, right? Like Cloverworks, I believe, is like a subsidiary of A1. Doesn't necessarily hint towards something bad that a show went from A1 to Cloverworks in the span of a season. I think the weird thing here is, number one, Drive has only done 3 shows before, and they're all small scale. You can go look at them on Mal. They probably all have less than like 80 to 70K members having watched them, period. In addition to that, there is, one thing to note, this is really like their first big production. So far as I understand, big as in like, this is full core. This is like a very popular manga. This is a very popular series. For reference, this is the 131st ranked manga on Mal in regards to popularity, in regards to just sheer members. You'll know why I brought that up in a second, but important to mention that because this is really their first big production. So there's a lack of track record here. That doesn't necessarily mean anything because of this next point. There was a director change. We're no longer dealing with Masahiko Murata, who directed the first season. We're now dealing with Kyoko Sayama. Murata, if you're unfamiliar, has done animation direction for Naruto Shippuden. He was in charge of it. He's the animation director. He directed the Naruto Shippuden movie 4, which is the Last Tower. I think it's called The Last Tower, Lost Tower. That's the movie about where Naruto meets the 4th Hokage or his dad, right? Also, he directed Baby Steps 2, which I've heard a lot of good things about. That is not like the greatest track record in the world coming into something like To Your Eternity, but it's more of a track record than like Sayama's. Sayama's track record is largely like Vampire Knight and Brave 10 as a director, and did animation directing for like Skippy. To be fair, I've not seen any of the shows that she has worked on, but what I will say is they're not high profile, they're not very renowned, and I've not necessarily heard anything from any of my peers other than, oh god, she directed Brave 10. Again, no real opinion of my own here, but I guess my point is not really that she is less proven. My point is, like, I feel like both of these directors weren't necessarily proven in regards to their ability to direct something of the magnitude of To Your Eternity, given its popularity. And yet, when we had a director who then proved in Murata his competency and his excellence in directing something of this scale, within a year of the show finishing its first season, we have already changed and overhauled the production squad. And in particular, the director, which is probably the best aspect of the entire show, the directing. That is a gigantic red fucking flag to me. And I had to mention this because this feels really unprecedented. To have a show, again, 131st ranked in regards to popularity, in regards to MAL members, right? For it to be that popular, we're talking about an award-winning manga here. Manga that's published in Weekly Shonen Magazine. Like, we're not talking about something small scale here that just swapped off production teams or whatever, or went to a subsidiary. This just like completely just like diverged off in less than a year, basically. The only two shows that kind of were similar in precedence were probably like Silver Spoon when it swapped over, and Scrolls actually told me about this one. I actually didn't know this. Silver Spoon, between its first and its second season, I believe, was it a director switch? I think it was a director switch. There's a staff change, but it's pretty not noticeable. It stays in studio as well. It still stays with A1. But that show is not nearly as big as To Your Eternity is. And number two, the other example was Attack on Titan. But Attack on Titan's a weird scenario because it is of the scale, it's of a larger scale than To Your Eternity, obviously, but you get the point of scale. But that's a weird one because Wit Studio in particular are working their animators to hell making that fucking show. And it could have been the case for Brains Base with like To Your Eternity as well, but Wit had been working on Attack on Titan for a really long time. They wanted to work on different projects. I can understand why they dropped it. This is weird. We've only been fucking with To Your Eternity for 20 episodes, not even like a full 2 core. So for it to, I don't know. This just screams red flags to me. I'm legitimately worried for the show. I would hope that my worry and concern is just me looking way too far into shit. I don't know what to expect. I think the show's probably going to be hurt pretty heavily in regards to production. Because from what we've seen in the PVs, it don't look good. Like, I've not seen a single thing in the PVs that looks good. And that's one of the biggest selling parts of the show. Obviously, the biggest one is the directing, and we're going to have to see how Kyoko Sayama does. But I'm scared. I'm really scared, all right? I want this to go well. I'm scared it's not. I think what we're probably going to end up walking into is maybe like a solid 5. Is it good to say solid 5? Is there such a thing as a solid 5? Right? Like, I think we're either gonna walk into a 5 or like the bare minimum of a 6 here, but I'm hoping I'm just fucking wrong. But I do think these hits are a really bad sign. The last show I wanted to talk about was Mob Psycho. I have no notes written for Mob Psycho, so I'm gonna freehand this, all right? So, I don't know how I forgot to prep this. Honestly, I could stop it and do the other record. I don't know why I left my recording on this monitor. I'm sorry, guys. Please don't hate me. I also wanted to change the background. Let me change the background at least real quick. All right, hold on. All right, I think we are good. So, last show on the list to talk about Mob Psycho 3. We're going to start by talking about Mob Psycho 2. I actually binge watched Mob Psycho 2. I sat down for basically like 2.5 hours, 3 hours. Reason why, again, it's twofold. First reason, same as To Your Eternity. When you got a good show, that gets sequels, you should stay caught up to it, because if you're like me, you're only watching usually like 1 to 2 shows a season anyways, if that. There are a lot of seasons I just go where I don't watch any shows. I'm watching 1 show from this summer. It's just Classroom of the Elite Season 2. I don't think I'll talk about that this episode. I might talk about it next episode, because that looks like it's going to be fucking wild. But anyways, there was some wild shit that happened this week. We'll talk about Mob Psycho. The second reason I watched it is because I had really negative feelings about the ending of the second season. The first time I watched it back when it was airing, I fucking hated it. And I couldn't remember why. I just remember saying, I think I talked to somebody this week, or last week, and I was like, I remember it being contrived and oddly, like, confusing and whatever. I didn't like where it went. Now that I've rewatched it, I don't agree with that analysis. I actually do think that the second season is good. I think it's better than I gave it credit for upon first watch. But I fucking hate this is going to go into a little bit of spoiler territory. Feel free to skip past this part, or skip like I don't know, maybe skip like 2 or 3 minutes. I'll try to leave a timestamp that is spoiler free in the description, okay? But this, the one part of Mob Psycho 2 that pisses me off to no end, and honestly ruined my entire opinion and enjoyment of the binge. There is a part where Mob finishes this track, or like this, it's like a 5K or 10K or something like that. He comes back home. Well, I guess he doesn't finish it. He like faints. I think it knocks out like midway through it, right? He comes back home, and before this happens, there's a scene where there's a character from season 2 comes up to the door of Mob. This character that was in this character was in season 1. He was an enemy, and in season 1, I just said he was an enemy. I'm fucking repeating myself. That's why I take notes usually. Basically, enemy comes up to the house, sees the brother. There's this really big allusion to the fact that he is about to fuck up their house. And when Mob comes back home, his house is on fire, and there are burnt bodies in his bedroom, 3 corpses, and presumably his entire family has just been fucking slaughtered. Ends on a cliffhanger. Mob is fucking pissed. He kind of looks like this in the background. Not actually like this. He doesn't actually look like this, obviously, but similar to that. And here's why I fucking hate this, because the beginning of next episode, it's like, oh, actually they're corpses. And on a rewatch, I didn't remember the fact that the parents didn't die. I just felt like that didn't happen, because I feel like I would have remembered something like that. And obviously it didn't actually happen, but the more aggravating thing, right, is, or this is the thing that aggravates me, is that not only do they resolve this fucking conflict in a matter of like 2 minutes of the next episode fucking starting, right? It is that the entire conflict, as in like the safety of the parents as well, is handled in the first 10 minutes of the next episode, which then makes me question, why did we tease the biggest fucking disaster possible in the entirety of like the Mob Psycho universe, his entire family dying and him fucking exploding, for it to be resolved in 10 minutes? What the fuck are we doing? This is like the weirdest use of shock value I can remember, at least in a recent memory. I don't get it. Let me change that. I do get it. I get functionally what is supposed to happen here. Functionally, what's happening narratively is this sets like the urgency for the situation, because there's a chance that Mob wouldn't understand how urgent it is that there are psychics that are about to attempt like world domination immediately after, like, you know, he finishes his track, or like his 5K. He might not have recognized the gravity of the situation, But I feel like there are just other ways to go about this than teasing the biggest disaster in the entirety of the Mob Psycho fucking universe, i.e. everything, like the event that most largely goes against the main character's morality and ethics just happening, and potentially the universe being destroyed, and then just going like, I'm just kidding. Like, why? There are just other things we could have fucking done. You could have entirely have omitted the parents being, like, teased for death. You could have just burnt down the house, and then, like, not had the corpses, which is such, like, a visceral thing to fucking show, too, for how false it was. I don't know, it's just, like, it's a massive tone shift. It's really abrupt. And there's just better ways I feel like that could have gone about this. The biggest one being just omitting the parents and the family being dead, or the allusion to it, or maybe not alluding to the fact that this guy, this villain that appeared from season 1 that is now an ally, you didn't have to show like this psychotic face that was implying that he was going to kill their entire fucking family. I don't know, poorly executed, very poorly executed. That killed my enjoyment of the second season. Why am I talking about this when we're supposed to be talking about Mob Psycho Season 3? Because I don't understand where the fuck we're going from here. That's why I'm talking about this. Because I think the second season, largely speaking outside of that moment, is good. But the second season also ends on a character arc for a villain that is roughly the same as like Teru's arc. It's like an expansion on Teru's arc from Season 1. In regards to talking about talent and taking yourself, measuring your self-worth outside of like your talent and capabilities and things of the sort, removing yourself from narcissistic tendencies, stuff like that. It's like an extension upon that is the end of the second season. So we've already gotten to the point where we are repeating character arcs, thematically at least. And it doesn't appear that there are any more interesting characters to develop and analyze, unless we're just going to go back to Mob, or we are actually just going to repeat conflicts. Maybe there's like Tsubomi, but she seems really uninteresting. I'm just confused where we're going in Season 3. Manga readers probably know, and my guess is that we're largely just going to be focusing on, one, tying up whatever loose threads there are narratively. So that is like Mob's ability to actually finish the 10K. Maybe he can actually do it. His ability to get fit, him asking about like Tsubomi, Reagan, maybe, I don't know, like improving his brand, things like that. Also, quick aside to Reagan, since we're already on the top, or since we're on the topic of him, another thing I didn't like about Season 2, how quick that Reagan arc ends is weird. It's like it's a really deep 2-3 episode arc about him and his collapse and him being a fraud, and he's taking all this heat, and all of a sudden this press conference happens, and there's this revelation that he kind of comes to where he thanks Mob, but then all of a sudden, like, the arc and all of the conflict from that arc is done in, like, 2 minutes. He just walks out as Mob kind of fucks stuff up off screen, and they meet up at a bridge, and it's just like, yeah, we're cool. And that's it. And the arc's done. And there's no more backlash. And everybody's cool with Reagan. It's like, what? How the fuck did this finish? Why did this wrap up so quickly? This is weird. There's no catharsis here, it feels like. Anywho. Back to what I was saying about Season 3. Feels like Season 3 is largely just going to be a narrative wrap-up. I'm worried because this feels like a case of, like, ReZero. Hilariously enough, those two shows initially aired in the same season. I think it was spring or summer of 2016. And they're both in this position where it's like, we got a Season 2 of ReZero, and I didn't think we needed one because I didn't understand where we were going to go after Season 1 that would be relatively, remotely close to being the same quality. It's the same thing with Mob Psycho 2. I didn't think we needed a second season of Mob Psycho. And I don't think it was nearly as good as the first one, but I do think it was solid. I don't know where the fuck we're going with the Season 3, at least in regards to character development and studies and stuff like that. So I'm worried a little bit. I'm not worried production-wise because it's fucking Mob Psycho. The second season of Mob Psycho looks insane, by the way. I think I'm starting to become desensitized to how great shows look because I came from watching To Your Eternity Season 2 to watching Mob Psycho 2 to watching Cyberpunk. So Yeah. I've just been watching a lot of good-looking shows recently. That's really all I got to say about Mob Psycho Season 2 and 3. Less of a discussion about 3, more of why, like, I didn't like the ending parts of 2 and why I think that's going to lead into Season 3. That's really all I've got for the anime section of this. The next section we're probably going to end up doing is the J-pop section. I will probably have scrolls on for this. I don't think there's anything else that I want to talk about in regards to J-pop on my own. That's all. So, I will see you on wherever that edit is. We'll take a break.
Trying to remove romance from my head, but it just will not go away. I can feel this problem will stay. I will regret this when I find you dead. Oh, this guilt will not go away. So I must fix your problem today.
I don't know. I don't want another Atticus situation.